the concept of Ubuntu surfaces in different ways in different tribal contexts or ethnic contexts.
Okay.
So the terminology changes, and therefore the mindset also will vary slightly. So, for instance, in Kenya, it's Harambee.
It's called Harambee?
So Harambee means
Harambee.
it has a slightly different take. It means coming together in order to make something succeed. But it's a collective coming together for the success and the good of all.
Oh, nice.
Okay, so it's a variation on that. It's not identical. And I think my experience, physical experience of being in different parts of the world remotely, not just the urban centers, but really the remote places where you've got your cultural foundations that then, in the city now we're much more exposed to global influences, but you're going to have the more authentic cultural variations as you move out of the city.
Yeah.
And so when you experience that locally, that has influenced both my study, because that's what I study, is I study structures, I study how entities within a system relate and interrelate with each other. And I always see that the leader is part of the system. They're not and that system is not a pyramid. So they're not at the pinnacle of that pyramid. They're integral to this web. I would say a web.
A web, okay.
And so, for instance, when you touch one component of a web, it has a ripple effect. You break a strand of the spider web, and it's going to morph. It's going to change. So a leader has the ability to bring change to a system or to a society. But he's not necessarily the key person. And when I think of my international development work, I need to connect to the local leadership because those are really the decision makers. So I see myself more as an influencer rather than a director. So even though I've given direction and leadership to projects and programs and initiating and moving them forward into grants and, ultimate realization of programs, where I was perhaps recognized as either the initiator or the finisher of something, but it was never without the full participation and the full and by participation I mean even decision-making participation. In fact, my decisions, I'm never the decision maker. So even when I'm on committees and I sit at board tables, I'm there as a listener and participant, never a defining figure.
Thank you, Dr. Ru, for touching that. And I'm glad that you have written something on Ubuntu as well in one of your articles, because it's actually something that when we begin to apply them in our daily lives, I don't think people will see this idea of I'm alone, it's just about me. When we begin to see that I am because we are, it means that you are more interested in the collective good of everybody. And that makes the world a better place if we begin to apply that one location at a time. Right? And you made mention of leaders changing the status quo or changing what it is or what was. How do leaders, from your own work or in your own perspective, how can leaders bring on more women into leadership, or how can they dissolve or resolve this gender issue when it comes to leadership? Because the leaders, so most leaders are men, or even the women. Do women really want other women to come up? What we say, the cliche, women supporting women. Do women really, in the actual sense of things, want other women to come up and be on the table? Or is it the men that don't want them? What do you think? What's your take?
I think when there's few spaces at the top in any kind of system, there's competition. And so women can be very brutal. They can be very, very competitive. When there's only a couple of positions available, now women are going to compete against women because there's so little space for them. And so I think, first of all, we need to change our mindset that there's enough space for good leaders. In fact, there is a void of good leadership. So my focus has always been on making myself the best person, being the best equipped I can be for any situation. And in my case, very broadly. I've seen that very broadly to become equipped in the medical field, in the educational one, in the business one, different types of things. So and that's professional competencies. Then I also think of myself as a person. I want to be the best human being. I just have worked on my own self since I've been a university student, or since I've been a teenager. So that's kind of been a focus. So I don't want to compete against anybody. I'm competing against my own standards and values, and I set them really high.
Fantastic.
So I want to never see another person as a competitor, because that results in unhealthy relationships and in unkindness and the kinds of things that I don't value. And because all of a sudden then I would undermine my own values, because I'm seeing, basically I'm looking out for myself if I'm looking to make space for myself. So I always think of how can I equip myself for a need, for a space, to be somebody else's, extended hand or a bridge or something like that. So I think that's, so really, yes, we talk about women, we need to make space for each other, and I would agree, but I think we do that by focusing on developing ourselves rather than competing against each other. And then I do also think that men need to be brought into this conversation as much as women. Men need to also champion women and need to also not just give space, but create space for them. So it's like, well, okay, so you've got a quota system. Well, we've got too many men in CEO leadership, and we need to have a goal of maybe whatever percent. Well, I think those are targets that help us in a practical way, perhaps change our thinking and to create opportunity for, let's say, we want to have some goals that are targeted to create opportunity. But at the same time, I don't ever want to be somebody's quota. I don't want to be given a position because they need another woman in X number of faculty and I meet a quota. So because then it's tokenism. And I want to get the position because I've earned it and I deserve it by every right is equally. And the unfair thing is very often that we actually have to excel at higher standards than our male partners. Which that's an area that I think most people see that is an unjust thing. And so this is, for me, I'm fighting for women, but I'm also fighting for justice. And so I think justice has to be there, and then we just have to kind of work at being aware of where the gaps are, and then supporting each other in encouraging growth and encouraging even competencies, and then also keeping an eye on, what I personally do is keep my eye on opportunities. I'm always keeping my eye on opportunities and thinking, who do I know that can fill that gap, and who needs to know about this opportunity? Because my biggest challenge has not been, am I smart enough? Am I good enough? That's taken care of. That's done. My biggest challenge is I've not had opportunities. Where is the opportunity? So now that I'm at a certain stage of the latter part of my career, I'm looking at those like you who are in their early part of their professional life. Where is opportunity for you? And because I didn't have opportunity, or very often I felt I had the skills but not the open door or the opportunity, I want to invite into opportunity, into a certain organization or a certain role or a certain situation, the young women who are qualified, but they would never know of that opportunity. And that's exactly how I've done my international development work. Looking for the gap, we're looking for the need. The people, and they really work hard. They're willing to sacrifice. They just don't know where to turn for answers. When it comes to grants, there's money available. They don't know how to access it. So I've felt it's my role to be informed, then to inform them, here's an opportunity. I'll walk you through it. I'll lead you to that opportunity and prepare you for that opportunity. And then they succeed.
Nice.
And so they didn't succeed because I gave them X number of grant funds, but they succeeded because they completed an application that was available to them. They simply didn't know of its availability. Yeah. So that's how I kind of see opportunity. And so when it comes to women in leadership, this is where I'm looking for opportunity. And so even a board that I had founded as a Canadian board from an international global board, when I stepped off, I did so with the intentionality of replacing myself with a young woman.
Oh, nice. Oh, this is so beautiful. Like, it feels surreal. Like, this is what you want to do. Like, that's what you wake up and you're thinking about. How do I give other people opportunity? And Dr. Anaya, thank you so much for this kind of opportunity you're creating for the younger people, younger leaders, as it were. And I think you're a rare species when it comes to this area, because I don't find a lot of people say this. I don't find a lot of people looking out for others, because what you're doing right now is that you're looking out for others to fill up opportunities that they don't have ideas existed. Thank you so much for this. And do you think leaders alike would build trust if they're ever going to create opportunities for others? Because what I feel or what I see is that leaders are always about themselves, thereby losing trust from their followers. So if leaders could do what you're doing in different contexts, wouldn't it be better if they did it so that they will gain the trust of their followers and they will lead aright? What do you think?
Yeah, what comes to my mind is the word authenticity. I think when you lead with the other person in mind, that's done out of a genuineness. Nice. I don't think you're role-playing in that. I think it's easy to role-play competencies and high-level placement in positions and place. But I think when your heart is set on service, that is done out of some form of, in most cases, I think there's certain people who do service as a strategy, because it gives them a strategy. It's something on their resume. X number of years I volunteered here and here, and it's a strategy. But I think you can sense fairly quickly why somebody is serving, and if you're serving because you've got the good of the other person in mind, that requires it. You don't even think about it. It's just natural. It's just a natural thing that you are authentic. And I think when you are authentic in your values and in your view of how you view yourself and others, that I think that's kind of a foundational approach to building trust.
That means being selfless in the real sense of it. Being genuine, like you rightly said, some people do it to play on the gallery, on the facade, but they have a remote intention of gaining access to a particular position, right?
Yes.
And it's so prevalent right now, or has it been around? But I noticed that it's hard to even build a reasonable, genuine relationship with people right now. Everybody's trying to gain something from others, trying to take.
Yeah.
Is this something that has to do with culture? Or has culture evolved to the point that nobody wants to be genuinely connected? People are out to gain from some other people, then use other people to step onto the next level. I understand the fact that, like you rightly said, when you look for opportunities, you get people to fill those opportunities, and you're doing it genuinely because you want to develop other people. But how about situations where people have ulterior motives of gaining access to a particular office or a particular opportunity? Then they indirectly begin to serve in disguise so that they will be perceived as being notably the right position, right people for the position, right? What do you think as a leader would help mitigate such fakeness? Because it's so prevalent right now. I find it so hard to relax when I'm meeting people for the first time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know who is genuine.
Okay. So one thing I think is, because particularly when life gets hard, economically hard, or other people have blocked your way forward in terms of, let's say, your own, I think of a young professional, there's a lot of blockage. Others have thrown boulders or barriers in front of you. All of a sudden you're into a survival mode. And in a survival mode, you're grasping at anything. And so then when you see an opportunity or a resource or a person, that becomes something that lets you survive. And so even the idea of climbing a ladder is I think, that has become quite global. It's not just North Americans. I see this very much in particularly educated Global South university graduates. Or high school, I won't say high school, but where university graduates, where they come from cultures where their grandparents and parents have been very, very generous and hospitable and looking out for the other. And they're not at all like that. Not at all. So I think there's various influences that have really changed culture. And so coming back from, let's say, a background culture of Ubuntu, that is not necessarily the prevailing culture, even in Africa. Not from my experience. And depending on generation, so it's quite, to me, my observation is quite generational, where the grandparent generation and the parent generation is much more selfless. But the young generation, it's like they're ambitious, which is a good thing. But that is good, and I have no objection. But they've lost the mindset of keeping the others with them, and they're running ahead and leaving them behind. And the idea of financially or practically or in any way mentally, thinking ahead and bringing others along with them is kind of lost. Where they're running ahead because of much more of a self-focus. And I don't know that it is necessarily individualism of the West or the education or the urbanization that has done that. I've not studied that. But I do think we've we as a contemporary society anywhere in the world have lost those values. But at the same time, I'm not discouraged, because I do see people in my life, young ones, young university undergrads, who still have this beautiful sense of, I'm a citizen of the world and I'm here for the good of others, and I want to make an impact and I want to be a positive influence. So I'm not quite sure about, with the trends, but I do see. Basically, what I'm saying is that what used to be an expectation or a normative way is no longer the case. It's no longer.
I remember the story you told us about your conference in Vancouver, or maybe I'm not correct. Maybe I've forgotten the name of the location, but you said you had a conference and it was a gathering of leaders from different parts of the world. And there comes a young man that was looking around, hovering around the room, trying to know the likely person that is perceived as maybe the most successful or most prominent, or maybe the chairman of the occasion, and he jumps right in front of the person and begins to give a handshake and sparks up a conversation, and was just chitty-chatty and all, and he was just ignoring the other people, feeling maybe they are not calling the shots. And when he realized that you were the chairman of the occasion, that you were the person everybody was looking forward to meeting, he felt disappointed because he had passed you by severally and he didn't make an eye contact. He didn't even say hello. He just disregarded you, thinking, maybe she's a guest. Little did he know that you were the one that calls the shots at the events. Something like that. I see it so much. And when I remember that story from you, I shake my head. I shake my head in disgust, because why are people just looking for who to step on? If you are genuine, if I see you, I don't need to know whether you are the CEO. I don't need to know whether you are the chairman of this occasion. As long as you're human and I'm meeting you, I'm having a conversation that is healthy. But when you begin to hop around, hovering around the room, who's calling the shots, who is the leader, who is the cleaner? No, I don't want to talk to the cleaner. That makes you fake. And that's not the leader we want. Because, go ahead, please, share.
So what comes to my mind is, even when you first asked the question, is how do you get there? What am I looking for, right?
Yeah.
And I would say competencies are essential, because to get the job done, you have to have the necessary skills or, knowledge to do something. But the key thing, I think, in leadership is character.
Exactly.
Is character, because you can have everything else, you lack character, and you might be admired by some because you've climbed the ladder in a brutal way, and they don't care about how you got there. It's just that you're at the top. But there's others that will disrespect you for that.
Yeah.
And then there's others that will basically see through all of that and say, well, they cannot give you honor. They will be courteous and polite and respectful, but they cannot give you the honor of their heart because of the character.
Yeah.
And so for me, the character is more important than competencies.
Yeah.
Competencies are an obvious qualifier, but what actually qualifies you for leadership, I believe, is character. And to get character, this is what I emphasize, and you've heard me say this in classes, is you have to be a good follower to be a good leader.
Yeah.
Because it's the qualification of shaping you and shaping the character of someone through good followership. And so a person who, one, doesn't have the humility for followership, in my opinion, has already disqualified themselves from leadership.
Fantastic. So do you think people learn how to become fake, or they, like you rightly said earlier, that the harshness of the economy can make some people begin to grasp, look around to grasp, right? But people that have the strength of character, do they just necessarily or wake up someday and begin to grasp and begin to fake themselves just because they want to survive?
I think some people are not self-aware of, their behavior and even their intentionality. So I do think there's a problem with a lack of self-awareness, which automatically leads to a lack of awareness of others and how to perceive and rightly perceive others. But I also do think that there are some people who actually set out to be strategic and use an environment, a system, others for their personal purpose. So if they're strategic, yes, they can learn that. You can actually learn how to do that. And of course, another big thing is, who do you identify as your model, your role model? So depending on who you choose as your role model, you'll learn and follow a path of humility and transformation and learning and constant growth and change, because you're an eager learner, you're perceptive, you're attuned to correction and to all kinds of stimulus that helps you grow. But if you are self-seeking, then you choose a different pathway, and you're going to learn the behaviors and hopefully fool others, and you will succeed in fooling some.
Wow.
And so this is where I think, as a leader, a top leader of influence really needs to also be discerning, right? So yes, judge character, but also be discerning, because there will be people who will be able to have the skills to fake certain kinds of attitudes and perspectives that actually are not genuine. They're role playing. In other words, they're role playing, and they can role play in certain situations, but they cannot do that for all of life. So this has to do with the authenticity of life. Is your life consistent, on the job, outside of the job? Are you the same person in the workplace or in the grocery store? Are you the same person to your friends as you are to the stranger? And so this need for genuineness, of course, I think people who typically are authentic tend to be genuine.
Yes,
I mean, I guess there's synonyms. There's synonyms, right? But I think people who role play, they shy away from authenticity because they really do carry different hats. They wear different hats based on the roles they're in.
We're going to round up very soon. So if you're still listening, please stick around, because Dr. Anaya is going to round off, and she still has few minutes to give us everything she knows about leadership, global leadership. Dr. Anaya, before I leave you to go, can you tell me which is more important? Is it transformational servant leadership or authentic leadership? Which is more important?
Actually, you've got three different ones there. I think servant leadership requires a personal transformative process. So you're not going to become a servant leader without first having gone through transformation. And I think when you lead through service, that I think also becomes a transformative process and journey for others. I think servant leadership requires authenticity. So I don't think you can of course behaviorally be a servant. You can in the job take on a service job. You can be in the service industries, but that is role playing. You're acting according to the criteria of performance standards, which is totally fair and fine. So even people who serve do not necessarily have a servant heart. And I think we need to have the authenticity of heart to genuinely serve. So I think they're all wrapped up in each other.
In each other, right?
Yeah,
so you can't take out one from each other.
No.
Yeah, I thought so too. So Dr. Anaya, we've come to the end of the session. But before you go, can you give an advice to leaders all over the world? What advice can you give that they can begin to apply that will help them serve better? When the leaders, like there is an adage in my culture that says the fish begins to spoil rotten from the head. So if the head of the fish gets rotten, just know that the body will be rotten. So you can't take out the fish head and find that the body is still edible. It's not possible. So that applies when it comes to leadership. So if the leadership is rotten, it means that the rest of the followers will be rotten. So what advice can you give for the global leaders to learn and begin to apply to keep the world safe and sane for all of us? We don't want wars. We don't want bickering. We don't want any altercations of any form. We want peace in our world. What advice can you give to leaders?
Two things come to mind, and one precedes the other. And the first is to identify a leader that is values-based, that has positive, healthy, grounded values and lives their values. So basically, not by performance follows values, but the birthing of everything needs to come out of a core of values. And so identify leaders who lead out of their values, assuming these are positive values, and then become a follower. And by follower, I mean a learner on that. And be very intentional and very observant, non-judgmental, but objective in learning, and imitate what's good, and self-check, and basically discard that which is of inferior values or of bad values or vices. Aim for that which is virtuous. Pay attention to those people, support those people that are leading virtuously, and identify in yourself, that which is virtuous, and let that transform you and grow you.
So self is key. The knowledge of self is key. The assessment of self is key.
Yeah. And of others and of values, I would say, because again, self can become so self-focused.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to focus so much on self as I would on values.
Values. Wow, this is so profound. Thank you, Dr. Anaya. Knowledge is power, but applied knowledge is super powerful. Thank you so much. Until I see you again.